floor to Colonel Andriy Lysenko, speaker on ATO. We will share with you the information about the ceasefire or the truce, whether the parties involved stick to the provisions of the agreement in Minsk. Colonel, you have the floor. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. The situation on the territory of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblasts remains to be extremely difficult. Up till the midnight, they preserved the actively. I am talking about the rebels. They tried to expand it, controlled territories controlled by them. After midnight on today, after the declaration of truce, which is envisaged by the Minsk agreements, we observe the decrease in the fighting activity of the illegal armed forces. The Baltsovo and Shirokino settlement remain to be the major points of concentration efforts of our enemy. General situation in this Ukraine has the signs of stabilization. The residents of Donetsk and Lugansk regions in the social networks confirm the silence beyond the windows of their houses. However, despite the ceasefire, there are some of the cases when they use the weapons. Since the start of the ceasefire, there is 10 times actually start to fire from grenade launchers and these mortar launchers on the or at the locations of the Ukrainian service ministers in Zharivka, Lugansk Donetsk region, and Toshkivka Lugansk district. Near Zolote, Chernuhina, and near down Popasna, terrorists shelled and fired at the ATO forces from using artillery, mortar launchers, and firearms. According to the information we have, the illegal armed formations in Donetsk and Lugansk regions planned provocations against the ATO forces in order to discredit our fighters. Also, the bandits changed the locations of their personnel and equipment from Gorlinka, Voglegirsk, Vergulivka, and Zaransk toward the line of contact. Over the last day, the mobile groups of the pro-Russian rebels, with the fire support of artillery of the RF armed forces, did not stop their attempts to entrap the Baltsovo in the Donetsk region and to block the ways of the of communication. This also the courage and professionalism of our fighters, of our forces, did not allow the enemy to make their plans, to translate to love their plans. Also, in the Mariupol direction, terrorists were involved, engaged in the fighting in this near Shirokino village in Volnovakha region, Donetsk region. According to the press center of ATO, in the process of very hot confrontation, the illegal armed forces lost a lot of their personnel. Over the last 2 days, over 600 terrorists were killed, 200 more were wounded. They also lost, terrorists lost 30 units of equipment. Over the last day, 9 Ukrainian servicemen were killed and 39 were wounded. Also, after the ceasefire, there were no losses in Ukrainian forces. Terrorists continued to conduct the air reconnaissance intelligence using the UAVs. We registered 5 flights of drones near Mariupol. DPRs through the TV tower in Donetsk actually transmit the so-called radio of Novorossiya. After the truce was announced on 15th of February to the side of National Guards of Ukraine, there was a kind of cyber attack. As a result of hacking the site, they actually published the materials and the information that the detachments of the voluntary Ukrainian Corps of the right sector, headed by Dmitry Yarosh, allegedly will continue their attack despite the truth. This information does not is actually bland lie. Uh, you can see the photo here. They changed the date of the publishing this material. The second photo, you can see that the material was translated from Russian in very fast manner using the Google Translator software. Such mistakes can be seen in the English language version of this information. The peaceful residents continue to perish as a result of the criminal shelling Ukrainian cities by terrorists. In Sartana, the Mariupol region, one of the guys was taken to the hospital, and unfortunately he died later. As a result of shelling by the illegal armed formations of the city of Popasna, Lugansk Oblast, using the Grad multi-rocket launcher, according to the preliminary data, two civilians were killed. Yesterday in Lugansk, Artemovsk district of the Donetsk region, and in the process of artillery shelling, the terrorists killed one local resident. After the shelling of Artemovsk on February 13th, the decision was passed to evacuate the children from the city uh, orphanage to number 3 to the city of Kharkov. Here they will stay till the situation stabilizes in their native city. In Svetlodarsk, Artemovsk district region, through the damage as a result of the shelling by terrorists of the gas pipeline, they stopped the gas and heat supply there. Ukrainian special forces detain the enemy subversive agents. One of them is the citizen Russian Federation, which is nicknamed Kok, came here in November 2014 and joined the bandit formation Vostok. Since January of this year, he was actually subordinated to the Givi leader named Givi and collected different, cutthroats to fight the Ukrainian servicemen. In the Donetsk region, they eliminated the subversive group. Another rebel, the resident of Crimea, nicknamed Gypsy, after he was trained, underwent special training in the Russian special camp in Taganrog, he joined the Somali formation and was sent to Donetsk. Three other members of this gang, Kotsoy, Pauk, and Malar, they also acquired some experience in terroristic activity near Ilovaisk, Latam, and Kivka. All three, since January this year, were selected for the gang Somali for the subversive actions. Ukrainian servicemen actually managed to take the machine guns and different other weapons, also the cartridges for them from those subversive agents. Yesterday, the border guards team near the checkpoint Kurakhove detected two citizens of Ukraine with the faked or forged passes. During as a result of the deeper check and verification, became known that one of them is on the record of the SBU and the suspect in financing the terrorism. In the east of Ukraine, the rotation continues to take place between the Ukrainian servicemen. Again, all the law enforcement personnel before going to the ATO zone, they underwent training, and they're ready and prepared to act in the extreme situation. The medical personnel at Dnipropetrovsk Regional Hospital saved the lives of the heavily wounded or seriously wounded defenders of our country. They managed to save 90, the medical officers, 99% of the heavily wounded heroes. Again, the first wave of the partial mobilization continues to take place, and the training centers of the armed forces of Ukraine received recently new detachments or new, let's say, groups of the trainees. The young men were seen off, and they were actually to join the forces, but they are near and dear. Their, let's say, combat spirit and motivation is very high. The Volynsk community actually pays attention to support their countrymen at the front line and in the training units. Uh, in several days, another group from Volhynia is going to join the trainees. And actually, one of the military units which takes part in the tour received 12,000 hryvnia. I have so following question. We all understand that there are some personal awards which are used to award the military men, the servicemen for the heroic deeds of heroism. Is there any kind of practice or theory that maybe not you're not talking about individual awards, but maybe some commandment of this or another military unit or detachment? Is question number one. Number two, uh, speaking about the the eastern part of Ukraine after the ceasefire, do you have any information regarding that the terrorists or the rebels take their weaponry with them and actually take away from the contact line as it is provided for by the Minsk agreements? We can state that over the time, or let's say as a result of the battles conducted by our servicemen in the front line, we can observe the mass-scale heroism of our guys. So I cannot exclude the possibility that they will come back to the practice of awarding the whole detachments or units, not the individual servicemen. And the president of Ukraine, our chief commander, draws say actually called upon everybody to pay attention specifically on individual basis to every soldier and commander. We know that a group of the group information resistance actually voiced their proposal to come back to award the whole detachment, the whole units with the top country awards. And we are not talking about the Ministry of Interior detachments or the Armed Forces of Ukraine, but also the voluntary groups and detachments which do not have any kind of the military, let's say, paraphernalia. And speaking about the redislocation or changing the location of the terrorists, we have the information that so far the terrorists and the rebels do not prepare some platforms or some special places where they are going to take back the weaponry or take away the weaponry from the line of contacts. And if you're talking about the heavy ordnance or weaponry, let's say retreat, which is envisaged by the Minsk agreements. We are going to start this action as soon as we can see that our adversaries or enemies are doing the same, and as soon as they continue this poor practice which they are involved now in and start to take away from the front line their weaponry, we actually are prepared to follow 100% of the provisions of the Minsk agreement to taking away the heavy weaponry. As regards the humanitarian convoy, do we have any information? Yes, we have any information that another humanitarian convoy is being now prepared to be sent to Ukraine. We had the information they're going to send it by air to Rostov, first of all, but we do not have any information about crossing of the Ukrainian border by this convoy. Actually, we had the information that Ukrainian troops are going to react or to respond to the enemy's aggression. Not only if there was some shelling or bombardment of the residential areas, but generally speaking about if there is a case of shelling of Ukrainian military guys. Well, it's obvious that our military personnel observes the ceasefire regime, but in case there are some attacks against them, our guys are going to provide the adequate, or let's say, response to that. How can comment on one of the provocations? One of the provocations, combat provocations, was the shelling of the Russian territory from the Novozovsk territory using the multi-rocket launchers Grad. We immediately informed that this tripartite observers group, which includes also the Russian Ukrainian officers, and the OSCE mission was immediately informed about that. The corresponding documents were delivered to their headquarters, and we actually observe what's going on there, including the attempt to persuade the Russian community that it is especially Ukrainian military guides who violate the ceasefire or truce, let's say, regime. And they also have some kind of the photos where the multi-rocket launchers Grad are operated by the people in Ukrainian military uniform, just to create the opinion that it is Ukrainian servicemen or Ukrainian armed forces who shell the Russian territory. And there were some calls to the editorial offices saying that there is some shelling, there is some kind of prisoners taking the prisoners, etc., etc. So I have a request to you, our esteemed colleagues, if you have some facts, please verify those facts before publishing them. Check whether they're true or not. One more specification, and the mass media carried the information that of terrorists that despite the truce in the ceasefire, which had to start at midnight last day, yesterday. In the Baltimore, there are Ukrainian servicemen that despite the ceasefire, the terrorists do not want to let go the Ukrainian servicemen. So what's the situation there? I understand that they are not going to stop the firing or shelling. So if there is a ceasefire, they are not going to let go the servicemen. Well, this rhetoric that they are not going to let go Ukrainian servicemen. This is something ridiculous. If our guys get the order to leave their positions, they will do that. But so far, there is no order issued to them. So we are not going to wait whether they allow us to do that, let us do that or not. This is kind of very cheeky, I would say, blatant declaration on their part. In fact, the situation is absolutely different. Two short questions. Yesterday on Twitter, There were some SMSs which were sent to Ukrainian servicemen to surrender, perhaps from sent by provocators, and they said that there is no need for you to fight any longer. So this is one question, whether it's true or not. And the second question, the day after tomorrow, they have to take away the heavy weaponry. If this does not happen, so what will be in this situation? As for the screens and the SMS messages, and this is another proof that there is some very heavy provocative work. In fact, every hour, some kind of information appears on Twitter or any other sources in order to disbalance the situation, to undermine the Minsk agreement, the truce or the regime of silence, etc., ceasefire. We are going to follow with much attention what's going on and inform the population about the real situation. And now, as regards what was your second question? Oh, yeah. Speaking about the withdrawal of heavy weaponry. Indeed, according to the Minsk agreement, after the second day of ceasefire or truce, there must be some movement of heavy weaponry with a gauge of 100 and more millimeters to the specific spots and places which have been determined and defined on February 12 in document signed on that day in Minsk. We expect that our enemy will observe those agreements because their signatures are on this document. And we are prepared to withdraw heavy weaponry. We are prepared to exchange the prisoners of war, and we are prepared to act according to the steps provided for by those documents. So if they continue to fire, is there any plan how you're going to act in this case? Here we rely upon the international observers and monitoring mission. We hope that our enemies are going to stick to the agreements. At least the Ukrainian party will observe those 100%. Thank you very much indeed. So far, we do not have any more questions. Thanks to all. Please follow